Hi, everyone. I'm Steinberg. I'm the mayor of Sacramento. Welcome to another edition of Dear Sacramento. This is our program every month or so to take questions from my constituents, those who I work for, and to discuss some of the most pressing issues facing Sacramento. And it's a great opportunity to use our social media to explain what I'm trying to do every day here at City Hall and out in the community to make Sacramento already a great city, an even greater city. Before I get started, I just want to talk a little bit about the coronavirus here, which is on everyone's mind. And it's certainly an issue that we all must take seriously. I want to tell you that the city is not a public health agency. We are in regular contact with the county health officials. I think they are doing a very good job in terms of dealing with all the questions that people have. And while we take this very seriously, my message continues to be, let's not panic. Let's just do the common sense things that will prevent, to the best we can, the spread of this virus. And it starts with the basics. Wash your hands. We've started this big social media campaign out of my office, and others have started it in their own realm where we're just trying to get people to wash their hands more regularly. And of course, if you're sick, or if your child is sick, stay home, keep them home. It's worth missing a day or two to make yourself better and to make sure that you don't spread whatever it is you may have. But we've dealt with the flu and strong cases of the flu before, and I know we don't know everything about the coronavirus, but we take it very seriously. But let's keep calm, let's live our lives, and let's do all the common sense prevention things that will make this better. So let us get to the questions here, and I'm going to read them and then I'm going to answer them. Lisa Natomas asks what we can do to help low-income and homeless people get transported to medical appointments. She says that Uber Health is being piloted in Southern California and asks whether we've looked into it. And so we have a lot of conversations with Uber, but we have not yet brought the Uber Health to Sacramento, although we have a variety of other ways to get low-income people and homeless people to their medical appointments. We're the only city in the state to have received the Whole Person Care Grant, which is the federal Medicaid waiver that we have used to create $64 million worth of resources to help those who are homeless and those who are on the very edge likely become homeless without intervention. And part of what we spend those resources on are providing easily accessible transportation to people who need to get to medical appointments or who need to get to the DMV or need to get someplace in order to help get back their lives. And so I'm going to take your question, though, and we're going to follow up and actually have a more specific conversation with Uber Health so that we can see whether or not that additional tool would help increase access to accessible transportation to our homeless population and those who are living in fragile circumstances. So thank you very, very much for the question. Candace at the Parkway neighborhood in South Sacramento offers this insight about her neighborhood. She says, can we please stop using the same formula in our South area strip malls? It is a recipe for continual failure. The nail shop, the check cashing, dollar store, cell phone store formula only attract the same clientele. We need to offer long-term incentives, including security to unique small businesses to open new shops and restaurants if we are ever to pull the South area out of its death spiral. We desperately need a win-win down here. Thank you. So, first of all, I don't want to broad brush all the good existing businesses that are out there in the South area, including some of the traditional businesses that you described, like the nail shops and some of the cell phone businesses. But I do agree with the premise of your question that we need to upgrade the kind of economic development, industry, and job opportunities that we provide to people in our neighborhoods. And this is the basis of why I led the campaign in 2018 to pass Measure U. Now, it's a complicated measure that we've talked a little bit in the Dear Sacramento Forum in the past, but I want to try to break it down once again because I think it's important information. Because of the California Constitution, I would call it the dysfunction of the California Constitution. If you want to raise a tax and you want to spend it on something specific like inclusive economic development in the neighborhoods, if you specify where the money has to be spent, it's a 2/3 vote. On the other hand, if you lay out a vision, but you don't specify where the money is going to be spent, it's only a majority vote. So I have this idea of asking the voters for additional half cent, $50 million a year, to be able to invest in the economic future of our neighborhoods, to create more small businesses, more entrepreneurship, more clean industries in South and North Sacramento and some of the other areas of the city that have not gotten the attention that these areas deserve. But we did it as a majority vote because we felt, and it turned out to be true, that a 2/3 vote threshold would be too high. We won with 57% of the vote. And so now we couldn't specify where the money would be spent, but now we have the obligation, and I have the obligation, to make sure that the money is spent consistent with what I promised. So what are we doing? First of all, we are investing a great deal in additional youth activities, specifically to provide hundreds of venues over the course of a year for young people on Friday and Saturday nights to learn trade, to have a safe and fun place to hang out on Friday and Saturday nights. We call them the youth pop-ups. We're investing in all kinds of youth facilities throughout the entire community. And on the business corridor issue, whether it's Franklin Boulevard, Stockton Boulevard, Del Paso Boulevard, Northgate Boulevard, we are about to float in 2020 what will amount to $100 million worth of bonds, of capital, specifically to be able to invest in our distressed commercial corridors. What's the main goal behind that vision and those investments? To actually start new businesses and to help entrepreneurs start new businesses in the neighborhoods, whether it's around food, because Lord knows we have this booming food ecosystem in Sacramento, and we need to make sure that the benefits are applied to some of the great historic commercial corridors in South Sacramento and in North Sacramento. And so we're going to come forward over the next number of months as we approach the 2021 budget, which is due in June of 2020, with a number of ideas that are going to go right to the heart of what you have asked. How do we increase the economic vitality, economic development, and small business opportunities for new and emerging industries in South Sacramento? I promise you that this is top of mind, even if the process to get these resources out there has not been perfect. So, question 3. Jason lives downtown and he asks why I haven't done more to create affordable housing during my 3 years in office. So I take that as a bit of a constructive critique that I've been in office 3 years and the affordable housing problem is not solved. And you know what? I will take your criticism because nothing ever moves fast enough for me. It takes too long to permit, it takes too long to build, and it takes too long to get new products up so that people can actually have, more people can actually have a decent and affordable place to live. So I'm not defensive about it because the pace is never fast enough for me. However, we have laid a foundation over these 3 years that I believe is going to begin to bring real results to this issue and to the people of Sacramento. And let me tell you what it is we have done. First of all, I have raised between my role as the chair of the Big 13 mayors, obviously my role as mayor of Sacramento, we have raised over $100 million to begin to address the homeless problem in Sacramento. And most of it is not yet out. But by the summer of 2020, we will have 700 new or repurposed shelter beds that we expect people to live in for no more than 4 to 6 months while they get the intensive support they need to be able to move off the streets and into permanent housing. We believe we're going to be able to get between 1,500 and 2,000 people off the streets every year as a result of this continuum of care that we are building. Modeled after what we're doing at the Capitol Park Hotel at 9th and L, which has been very successful, the imperfect but still positive Railroad Avenue shelter experience in North Sacramento. And it's not just going to be shelter, it's going to be tiny homes, it's going to be scattered site units, it's going to be sprung shelters, quality military style structures that are going to give people the stability and the help they need to get off the street. So that's homelessness. Now, on affordable housing, I recognize that the best cure to homelessness is to make sure that people have enough, have a place to live, and that they do not become homeless in the first place. So again, as a result of Measure U, we are about to float what will end up being $100 million for an affordable housing trust fund. Because frankly, over my 3 years, we just have not had the public resources to be able to match the resources and the will of the private sector to be able to do a lot more. The $100 million trust fund, in my opinion, excuse me, is going to be a game changer because we're finally going to have skin in the game. By the way, 40% of that money is going to be dedicated by ordinance to people of extremely low income. Maybe more significant than that, 30% of that trust fund is going to be dedicated to public subsidies of no more than $100,000 per unit, because the average subsidy to build a single unit of affordable housing in Sacramento is between $300,000 and $400,000 a year. We're never going to get to the volume that is needed with that kind of price point. So we must start an efficiency housing revolution here in Sacramento. Manufactured housing, stacked cargo units, tiny homes, pallet homes, quality, safety, and dignity, but less expensive, faster to build, and easier to build. When you combine that new direction with the fact that we now have reasonable rent stabilization and just cause eviction protection now in Sacramento and throughout the state, I am hopeful that we're going to be able to build more and protect more people who are housed but are at great risk of becoming unhoused. I spend, I would say, to be candid with you, at least half of my time as mayor on the issues of homelessness and affordable housing. And I don't expect that that is going to be any different as I continue my service until the problem is significantly better. Lanisha of South Sacramento wrote in asking what the city can do to help break the cycle of generational poverty. Wow, isn't that really the most important question that all of us in positions of responsibility have to ask and answer? I view this as my foremost obligation, to put in place the tools that are necessary to help more people, especially young people, overcome systemic and generational poverty. You know, last year in 2019, I was the first mayor to give my State of the City address out in the neighborhoods to talk about generational poverty. I gave my speech at the Pinell Community Center, and maybe as part of this, we had to post that speech again because it's a good reminder of where we've been and where it is we must go. I talked about the history of redlining in our neighborhoods. I talked about the difference between a third grader growing up in East Sacramento versus some parts of South Sacramento. And I talked about our obligation, not just in words, but in deed, to invest in young people and in more economic opportunity for families living in our neighborhoods. And again, this is the Measure U vision. And it isn't perfect for the reasons that I described before, but we've actually gotten off to a real start in terms of investing in a number of neighborhood-based assets. And this coming year, we will have at least $20+ million, plus the beginning of the bond proceeds, $100 million for community and $100 million for affordable housing, that we are going to invest in young people, and we're going to invest in neighborhood-based businesses and people who have a dream who need just a little bit of a loan or a grant in order to get started or to expand their business. And so we will not solve generational poverty in a day or a year or even during my 2 terms in office. But I hope that we change the culture of this city in a way that says our job is not just to fund and run the city, although the city itself, through its youth programming and through a lot of what it does, contributes, of course, to the betterment of the community. Of course, that includes our public safety. But that our job as a city is to also spend some of our resources outside the city. I mean, within the city, within the city limits, but outside the bounds of city government. That it's our job to invest, not just to operate the city. Thank you for your question. I should also add that we are working on a couple of signature initiatives around inclusive economic development. The 2 I'd like to highlight are Aggie Square, which is our collaboration with the University of California at Davis and Chancellor Gary May, where they literally are bringing more of the university across the river into Sacramento. Now, UC Davis is already in Sacramento, of course, with the Med Center. But Aggie Square goes beyond that. We're going to be the center of technology and innovation and use Aggie Square as a place for the community to launch new businesses around advanced mobility, around technology, around food, around innovation. And it is a partnership that is going to be capitalized in a huge way. It's not just going to be a pilot. UC Davis has been unbelievable, as is Chancellor May, in working with us. And frankly, they're leading this effort. Here's the key. When Aggie Square is built out, will we have made an equal commitment to workforce development, connecting Aggie Square to our neighborhoods? And will the young people of our neighborhoods be educated, trained, and first in line for the new jobs we're creating at Aggie Square? The same is true, by the way, of the Sacramento Mobility Center, which is our collaboration with SMUD and Sac State to be the center of advanced research and development around clean mobility options for people. We're already the center of jump bikes and electric scooters and the gig cars, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the Mobility Center will help elevate us to even greater heights when it comes to leading there. So, Steve Brody of The Pocket. That's why we're spending city dollars to acquire land for bike trails when, in his words, the homeless he's showing in the American River Parkway has made it a deplorable and unsafe area for recreation. Well, I get this question a lot, and I understand your frustration, and I understand the frustration of people who cannot use the county jewel, and it is a county jewel, not just a city jewel, the American River Parkway, without sometimes being accosted or without dealing with the consequences of the homeless problem. And so I would say that we are all going to lose if it is an either or choice. In other words, if we close off or restrict access to the parkway because of the homeless problem without dealing with the homeless problem, then everybody loses. If we just remove people from the parkway without providing an alternative that involves a roof and whatever help people need to get indoors, and by the way, I have called for a statewide legal obligation for people to come indoors if they're offered a place to live. So I don't believe living on the riverbank or living on the streets is a civil right. But the answer to restoring the beauty and the safety of the American River Parkway is to actually be more aggressive about addressing the homeless problem, not just by moving people along, but by actually providing a roof and services for people who so desperately need it. I talked about the 700 beds in Sacramento and the fact that I believe we can get thousands of people off the street. Some of you may know that I also have a state role and responsibility. I'm the co-chair of Governor Newsom's task force on homelessness. And we made last month, or I should say in January, what some considered a pretty revolutionary proposal. And I want to talk to you a little bit about it because it really relates to your question, Steve. When you stop and think about it, name another area of major public policy where everything that government is called upon to do is optional or voluntary. We don't say it's optional for society to provide public education to its kids, our kids. When it comes to climate change, we didn't say to the energy world, please volunteer to substitute out your fossil fuels and replace them with renewable energy, and do it on your own time and tell us when you made progress. We mandated it. And the mandate has actually sent a signal that has changed the behavior when it comes to energy and renewable energy in the state of California. Homelessness is a crisis of epic proportion, yet everything we do is optional or voluntary. There are no benchmarks. There's no requirement to bring people indoors. There's no consequence or accountability for failing to make any progress. Some jurisdictions lean in big. Others do whatever they have to do. There are some jurisdictions outside of the greater Sacramento area that have said clearly, we are going to do nothing about this problem, that it's a state responsibility. We are calling for a legally enforceable mandate for all levels of government to bring people indoors, and to say that if every city, every county, every region, and the state does not meet aggressive but reasonable benchmarks over an aggressive but reasonable period of time, that there needs to be a real consequence, not punishment or fines or taking away their money, but to empower somebody, whether it's a court or somebody else, to actually remediate the failure to build enough shelter beds, to build enough housing, to provide enough services, to get the money out faster, to require jurisdictions to consolidate their resources across their jurisdictional lines to meet the aggressive benchmarks. We can no longer make optional what we know is required, and that is to bring people indoors. That'll help the Parkway, it'll help Sacramento, it'll help the state, and it'll help the country. Joe asked why the city hasn't banned smoking in the outdoor seating portion of cafes and coffee shops. I know my colleague, Councilmember Hanson, did propose a patio smoking ban in 2014. It did not pass, although we banned smoking, of course, as a matter of state law and local law inside of restaurants. I point out that last year we did pass an ordinance banning the sale of flavored vape and tobacco products in the city of Sacramento, because those products are marketed directly to kids, and we don't want them sold in our community. In terms of the ban on outdoor smoking, look, I would go as far as we can go when it comes to limiting or banning smoking. I think it's awful. And obviously the effects of secondhand smoke are very serious, and people get sick and die of simple exposure to secondhand smoke. This is an issue that I want to revisit. Again, it's been a while since 2014, and your question prompts me to dig in again and see what we might do. Carmen from Curtis Park asked when the city plans to ban styrofoam and single-use plastic. She says she finds it embarrassing that we haven't adopted effective environmental regulation. So in 2016, we did ban single-use plastic bags in the city of Sacramento. And the state banned them the same year. So we actually have passed some very effective environmental regulations. I would say that we always must do more. For example, we're of course part of the state. The state passed a law a couple of years ago that says plastic straws only when they're demanded by the customer. Otherwise, the restaurant must provide paper straws. So here in Sacramento, by 2021, we plan to reduce our waste going into landfills by requiring residents to separate their food waste. This will be the single biggest change to the residential recycling program since it started in the 1990s. More work to do, but again, we ban plastic bags, we limit the use of plastic straws, we're going to require that food waste be separated in 2021. And we also have established a joint climate commission with the city of West Sacramento, and we're working very hard, again, to lead the country when it comes to improving the climate, from electrifying all of our future city buildings to leaning in and leading on advanced mobility here in the city of Sacramento. We were the recipient of a $44 million grant from Electrify America, designated as the most forward-thinking green city in the state, and it came with real money. And we're using the money to jumpstart the EV revolution in Sacramento. So again, take your criticism in a very constructive way. Much more to do, but we're not sitting on our hands. Mary from East Sacramento supports the idea of converting the Motel 6 on the corner of Alhambra and N Street into a navigation center for the homeless. She asked what's happening with the property. So first of all, your council member, Jeff Harris, has been an absolute champion when it comes to homeless issues. He has been fierce in helping me and the city lead the way when it comes to creating more navigation center opportunities within our city. We asked Jeff about this when we got your question, and what he told us is that Mercy Housing is working to put together a purchase deal for the site. Mercy Housing, of course, is one of our leading affordable housing and supportive housing nonprofit developer in Sacramento and in the state. The purchase has not yet been completed, and it's a little bit complicated. I will say this: we are opening our next, after the women's shelter in Meadowview, a 100-bed triage center under the freeway at Alhambra and WX. Why is that significant? It's hugely significant because one of the most visible manifestations of our homeless problems, what we see, the tent encampments under the freeway. And Lord knows we hear a lot from constituents about that. We are going to have a place now to be able to say you can't camp under the freeway, because we now have a place for you to come indoors where you can get help and treatment. And that'll be up by the summer, and we've got enough money to do it. The women's shelter, the other beds that get up to 700, and plus we have additional resources with the continued partnership and help of the state to do even more. Great questions today, dear Sacramento. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, I look forward to seeing you in person, as I'm out in the community quite a bit, but this reminds me that maybe what I ought to do is a few more actual town halls where we can take the questions directly and I can get some feedback to the answers I'm giving you. But regardless, always try to be accessible. My team is always accessible. I know I work for you, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to participate in today's forum. Have a great day.